Thank you, Director of the Program, Lindiwe Mazibugo. The Councillor Solim Simang, the Executive Mayor of the capital city of Tshwane, His Excellency, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps in our Republic, and the Ambassador from the DRC, Ambassador Mpoho, other ambassadors and high commissioners present, mayors, and all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen who are present here this morning. Good morning, and welcome to the executive capital of the Republic of South Africa. But let me first take this opportunity of thanking the city of Tshwane and the mayor in particular for hosting this very prestigious event. I want to thank especially the progress that the city is making in shredding its pre-1994 image as a city that shut fellow Africans out as a citadel of exclusion. We want to strongly encourage the city's warm embrace so that in time it too shall be seen as a truly African city. It is also a great pleasure for me to address this high-powered gathering of African capital cities' mayors with their representatives, governments, business persons, and the people of our beloved South Africa on a subject matter that is critical to the developmental agenda's objectives in all our societies in Africa today. I have been particularly asked to speak on a topic of responsible leadership as the key to sustainable cities. This forum could not have chosen a more appropriate topic than the one that we have chosen. In February 2017, I had the pleasure to represent my country in Davos at the World Economic Forum, which had coined the phrase responsible and responsive leadership as its theme. The theme speaks to the need for all leaders to listen to the aspirations of our people, to listen to the concerns of our citizens. There can be no better injunction than to call for all you as delegates who are gathered at this forum to be faithful to this theme by considering every time you do your work the concerns of your own citizens above your own concerns. Let me also declare my utmost appreciation for the role that the cities play in grooming leadership for national office, even though I will use examples that are external to Africa. Former President of France, Jacques Chirac, was mayor of Paris before he became the president of France. Across the regions and continents, mayors are increasingly becoming leaders, national leaders, and have also become leading voices in some of the most critical global debates. Former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, is now British Foreign Secretary. The former Mayor of Shanghai, Jiang Zemin, was the President of China between 1993 and 2003. There are many, many examples that show that cities play a key role in grooming leaders for the future. Cities are also hubs for ideas of commerce, of culture, science, productivity, social development, and have also enabled their people to advance economically and socially. There are many challenges in our cities for essential services, energy, housing, transportation, better education. All these can promote the rapid growth of our cities. Our capital city of Tshwane is the second largest municipality in Gauteng and is among the 6 biggest metropolitan municipalities in our republic. It is also faced with many of these challenges and must overcome them in ways that allow it to continue to thrive and grow while improving resource use and reducing pollution and poverty. Since 1994, the South African government positioned our country on a sustainable growth path, and this is a right that is enshrined and underpinned in our Constitution. Our Constitution in the Republic gives everyone the right to have the environment protected through reasonable legislative and other measures, and also further requires local government to secure ecologically sustainable development and use of natural resources while promoting justifiable economic and social development. Honored guest, our country is alive to the growing environmental concerns. As a signatory to the Paris Agreement, we are duty-bound as a country to adhere to the undertakings that we have made. On the 4th of April this year, I was honored to sign agreements opening the way for the construction of 27 renewable energy independent power producer projects with a combined investment value of 56 billion rand and a combined capacity of 2,300 megawatts of electricity. This, I believe, was a new dawn for renewable energy in South Africa, following an extended period of uncertainty, not only for the renewable energy industry, but also for private sector investment in the energy sector. We must be on course to fulfill the target of our president to bring in $100 billion of investment into the South African economy. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me not to dwell much on the subject of energy in my address, because the Mayor of Bangu, Emile Gross Raymond Nakombo, will say much in the session that will be facilitated by my colleague Lindiwe Mazibuko later today. This gathering takes place when South Africa celebrates what would be a centenary of our icons, Nelson Mandela and Albertina Sisulu, who would have turned 100 years today had they lived. From Nelson Mandela, we learned that a real leader uses every issue, no matter how serious and sensitive, to ensure that at the end of the debate, we should emerge stronger and more united than ever before. That is your challenge in this forum. The sustainability of cities is a worldwide concern, and our country is not immune to it. The forum is meeting at a time when the debate about the relocation of our parliament in South Africa has arisen again. At the center of this debate is whether Cape Town, where parliament is currently located, can survive without hosting our legislative capital. The concerns which you will be deliberating on will therefore be keenly watched for their outcomes as to inform the debate that has risen about its relocation. I will draw also my experience from the brief time I served in the period just before the first democratic elections in 1994. At that time, I was privileged to work with some excellent members of the old administration in the then city of Durban to plan for the future of the democratic city. Coming from a troubled and divided past, it was an honor to work with visionary city leaders under Mayor Margaret Winter to craft a future democratic city of Durban, now eThekwini. The task was not without its own challenges, because some within her administration wanted to preserve the old order and were bent on derailing the democratic future that she had envisaged. I do not pretend that the modeling of the city of Durban to what it is now, eThekwini municipality, was the perfect template for all cities, but there is evidence of some similarities which can be shared. One of the first challenges that we faced concerned the very concept of urbanization. The bright lights theory where people are drawn by centripetal forces of the city, pushed by the centrifugal forces of the sending areas, presented a challenge that needed to be tackled heads-on. Here was a city which had legislated against the presence of Africans in its environs, facing a sudden influx of people who wanted to experience their impending freedom by flocking into the city. The opening of floodgates had to be managed sustainably. Spare thought for those who were drawn into the city, pushed by abject poverty from the African reserves that had been confined for centuries. I do not doubt that all city administrators who are gathered here at this forum have to deal with a deluge of people who claim the city as theirs to occupy even when the city had not planned for them. Cities respond differently to these challenges, and our own South African cities and local government in general have responded with the concept which we refer to as indigent policy, a policy which is very expensive to implement. I'm sure South African delegates will share their experience on the implementation with this policy with delegates. The growth of slums as a result of urbanization present another challenge. Africa has a population of more than 1 billion people. This population would have doubled by year 2050. More than 60% of urbanized Africans lives in slums with inadequate potable water, sanitation, and other infrastructure. One shudders to think what would happen if there was to be an outbreak of waterborne diseases in these unplanned settlements, or if there are tropical storms or fires. Even with the best of available rescue services, how do firefighters, for instance, access sites if slums prevent the construction of access roads? The cost of slums rehabilitation programs are usually too high for the cities to afford, and the best way that many cities have dealt with them is to accept them as a reality of life. But there is an ominous threat to city governance as a result of slums, so we need to do something about them. The rise of slumlords forming an alternative government in conflict with formerly elected city officials is a trend that undermines African democracy. It is anticipated that by 2030, half of Africa's population will be living in cities. The growth of slums as the result of this exodus is a reality that you as city leaders must begin to grapple with, not tomorrow, but today. Honored guest, one headache that we all face, which I'm sure is being faced in many African capitals, is transportation services. Cities are defined by the transportation services that they provide to their own citizens. Although Durban has a city-owned bus service, it was divided along racial lines and racialized residences which defined South Africa's society pre the dawn of our democracy. Those were the means of transportation in terms of motor vehicles were also serviced with a better city-sponsored bus service. The poor majority lived far from the cities, and bringing them to the city was costly. I do not doubt that other African cities and capitals are also seized with the provision of accessible, sustainable, and affordable transportation for their own citizens. The problem of congestion may appear to be affecting only your city. As you travel through Africa, you find all peak hour traffic in all our major cities in Africa. As the city space shrinks, servitudes for more road expansion have been taken over by buildings. Congestion pricing strategies may be devised, but of what use are they of their collection if collection is a nightmare, adding on top of low revenue collection capacity? Revenue collection was also a challenge which faced us as we tried to prepare the city for democratic dispensation. One of the weapons which were used to bring the city to its knees during the apartheid era was a rents boycott. The question was, what was the rationale for paying dues to an unrepresentative city? In other words, why should black people subsidize their own suppression through paying for services? We were faced with the task, after democracy, of convincing our people that the time had now come to end the rent boycott. It is true that many of the citizens cannot afford to pay for these services, and the mechanisms have been developed to cater for them, but the legacy of rent boycotts has continued to be a challenge for democratic cities even today. I have no doubt that many African cities face the same dilemma and problem of revenue collection, which must be tackled. Delegates. Waste management is also a headache for the growing cities in Africa. Even though there is a comforting growth of waste collectors because of the consciousness about recycling, these waste recyclers do not address the challenges faced by cities in waste collection. Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, envisages cities will be recycling at least 50% of the waste that they generate. With no revenue collection strategy, waste collection suffers the shortage of money to allocate resources for waste collection. Piling waste enhances the city's decay and leads to the growth of downtowns. Today's downtown is tomorrow's slum. Many governments have tried to run away from decaying towns by relocating their capitals by building new cities. And building new cities generate pride and national prestige. But on the whole, establishing new cities is a costly exercise which only a few governments can afford. Many of the current cities were, according to the chairman of the Architectural Association of Kenya, Steve Ondo, planning has been taking place after development instead of the reverse. New cities do not address the major problems of revenue and waste management, and soon they too will befall the fate of abandoned former capitals. That means we need to do things right. Let's plan before we forge ahead. Honored delegates, a new challenge is gradually emerging: a governance menace to municipal leadership, malfeasance, lack of accountability, and abuse of municipal funds. In the past, there was much spotlight on how national government deals with its resources. Under the general rubric of accountability, national anti-corruption efforts have zoned in on corrupt activities. The attention has now turned onto local government. Recently, here in South Africa, our own Auditor General has released an audit outcomes report for local government. I'm limited by time to expand on the outcomes, but I can confidently state that after a lot of barking, our Auditor General is soon gonna be biting. 2 weeks ago, his staff was going about their constitutional duty in one of our municipalities. They were threatened with their lives if they pried too deeply into the books. And just last week, our national parliament gave more powers to the Auditor General to conduct his constitutional duties. I'm stating this to show that municipal governance has become even more robust, and leaders of the sphere of government have to respond accordingly to governance and accountability. Lest I make you rue the decision to visit our beautiful capital city with a gloomy portrayal of an African city, follow me in looking at the opportunities that can turn to the African city to a very exciting proposition. The African city cannot be compared to its counterpart in the other continents, but its backwardness can be immediately frog-leaped into the next century through technology. Africa, through its cities, is virgin territory for the deployment of new technologies. The massification of mobile telephony in our continent has unleashed a mobile entrepreneur who penetrates as many walks of life in mobile education, mobile health, and mobile finance as we see in Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and in fact in the whole of the East African region. When the prospects of the fourth industrial revolution are discussed, African city leaders should take note. This time, Africa should not be left behind as she has been in the last 3 industrial revolutions. Cities have of late realized that they cannot work alone. At the same time, they have realized that relying on their national fiscus, which themselves are facing serious strains, is a very long wait. They have begun to rely on themselves. I have been impressed with the growing concepts of city twinning. I propose that the twinning of cities should now go beyond an African city twinning with a city in another continent, but look into the pros and cons of African cities twinning between and amongst themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, while the development of city regions may raise conflict between ambitious city and your own national government, cities, it is a fact of life, are becoming commercial enterprises which are more adept at assisting rural areas near them than their own national governments. To use our country as an example, there is an expectation that the 6 metropolitan councils should play a catalytic role in rural communities abutting them. These 6 metropolitan councils have faced different challenges, but by and large, some rural councils cannot generate enough revenue to sustain themselves and are benefiting from assistance from the cities next to them and as well as national government. Even when the cities assist their rural abutting areas, they still face interference from other spheres of government. The prestige of national office is sometimes threatened by the power that local governments hold and its access to ordinary citizens. We need to realize that all politics is local. Tensions will always arise, but that tension must be managed. Ladies and gentlemen, the advent of city regions is a suitable foundation for cities to leverage on regional integration that is propounded by our leaders in the African Union. If African economic communities need to succeed, they need the cooperation of cities which make them. Cities which cooperate across regional communities can leverage their economies of scale and in the process boost their own revenues. Even as we speak of regional communities, we're indirectly talking of cities which can embrace one another in making their regions viable economic entities. As cities become formidable political entities in their own right, they need to evolve accountability, which must also grow. Gone are the days when city fathers, because many of those cities were ruled by men, would decide what they could do with their citizens. But there is now a growing trend towards consultation about projects, about programs that cities undertake with their own citizens. This is logical, for citizens are beginning to question why expenditure on the revenues they pour into the city coffers should be arbitrarily decided by city officials who choose their pet projects, as we all know. As I speak, many of our local councils in South Africa are embarking on what we call a consultative process of the Integrated Development Plans, IDPs. Here, they consult their citizens about city plans for the next financial year. Consultation, therefore, does not become an end in itself. There is a growing demand and a positive response from city leaders to report back to their communities about progress that is being made. That's why the issue of accountability, responsive and responsible leadership. Finally, I think cities can find their sustainability in the implementation of the recently signed African Continental Free Trade Area, the IFTCA. This is the largest free trade agreement since the launch of the World Trade Organization. It is estimated that by 2030, the market size is expected to include 1.7 billion people on the African continent, with over 6.7 trillion US dollars of cumulative consumer and business spending. Are our cities ready for that? Most of the spending will be in your own cities. It is therefore common cause that leaders who are gathered here today have to take advantage of this development and align themselves in their planning with reaping as many benefits from agreements as possible. Much has been said about the non-signing of this agreement by the two largest economies in Africa, South Africa and Nigeria. But I would like to assure you at this forum that once all the necessary approvals have been obtained in South Africa and in the AU, our president will follow up the signing of that declaration in Kigali. As I sit down, I would like to take this opportunity of wishing you well in your deliberations. I also want to invite you to spend a few days more in our beautiful city of Tshwane, experiencing its wonders and its surrounding areas of interest. I thank you for your attention.